Hi, and welcome to Simply Christ. This is where we make Jesus Christ our master, and we learn to explore and live in that spiritual realm. I'm glad you are joining us. If you are not a subscriber, please do so. And if you are a subscriber, thanks for doing so. I know we have several new subscribers, so thanks for joining us. Also, hit the share button. You can share it on all different kinds of media platforms. I hope you don't mind the change in scenery. This is because I am out of state. I'm visiting some family, so I've decided to come out here in this area here. It's really nice. A little bit of harsh shadows here, and if you hear some cars passing by, please forgive me, but it's probably the best I could do because of all the wind. Today I want to talk to you about something that is extremely important in understanding the spiritual life and who we are. If you are a person who's looking to live that spiritual life, it's important to understand who we are. And I know that sounds kind of such a cliche, because many times Christians and Christian leaders and pastors believe this. We're children of God, but they leave it at that, as if God is somewhere up in heaven, and what our responsibility is to do is just kind of be a good person and go to church and do nice Christian things, whatever those Christian things may be. But is it really that? Well, we're going to turn and look at a passage of Scripture, and it is going to be found in 2 Peter chapter 1. 2 Peter chapter 1, Peter says in verse 3, "As the one who has given all things, which are of the divine power, with the life and awesomeness of God by his teaching, who has called us into his glory and majesty, who has granted you by these great and precious declarations to be sharers of the divine nature, when you flee from the corruption of desires which are in the world." Now that is saying quite a bit, isn't it? Stop and think about what is being said here. Peter is not describing an individual who is just a churchgoer or someone who just says, yes, we believe Jesus is the Son of God. What he is describing is an individual who has completely surrendered their life to what? The divine nature. But what is the divine nature? It's the godly nature. We have a human nature, which is the world of sin, the world of worldliness. It's our old selves. But when we become disciples of Jesus, and what I mean by disciples, I'm not talking about individuals who, again, just say these magical words and we are now members of this spiritual kingdom. No. What we are doing is we are joining a totally new kingdom. We are leaving this kingdom of darkness and we are walking into a kingdom of light. And in this kingdom of light, there are certain characteristics that come with it. And these characteristics are an invitation and really an imploring to live in the divine nature. When you think about what is being offered to us as being followers of Jesus Christ, it's stunning, because you and I have been called to live in a divine nature, not a sinful nature, not an evil nature, not a worldly nature, not even a moral nature. We'll talk about that sometime. But a divine nature. The more I started thinking about that and reading that and seeing what that means, is that you and I have been transformed once we accept that we need to live and operate in the spiritual realm. When we do this, we are transformed into another spiritual realm to where we now become sons and daughters of the Most High. An invitation. Look at some of the verses here, and I want to just pick apart some of the things that are said here. First of all, in verse 3, at the beginning, "As the one who has given all things which are of the divine power." We talked about grace in the past. Grace is divine power to live in the divine nature. We cannot live in the divine nature unless we have the divine power to live in that nature. And living in that nature means that we have to have that power, and God gives us that power. It's called grace. It's movement. It's the movement we have. Jesus talked about this with Nicodemus in John chapter 3, when he described the children of God are like the Spirit. The people who are born of the Spirit, they're like the wind. You don't know where it's coming from or where it's going. He's describing grace. He's describing movement. You and I are called to live in that movement and we have to have the divine power. So what's taking place here? Again, in verse 3, as the one who has given all things which are of the divine power, not some things, but all things. I don't want you to take this as to some type of Bible study to where we highlight it on our Bibles and we say, yes, that's nice, and we put a marker in it, and it stays up here in our heads, but it doesn't go into our spirits. See, that's the problem that many followers of Jesus have, is that we put it into our head, but we never let it get into our spirit, which is different from our minds. So you and I are called to live in this divine nature, but in order to live in the divine nature, which is a heavenly nature, we have to have divine power. Think about that for just a second. Divinity. We're called to live in that. Awesome, isn't it? Look at the next verse. The same verse. With the life and awesomeness of God by His teaching, who has called us into His glory and majesty. We're not just called into standing at the foot. We are called to be sons and daughters of the Most High. Sons and daughters of God. But if we want to become sons and daughters of God, we have to live in the divine nature. And it is through the teachings of Christ. That's why this channel is all about living in the teachings of Christ, making Jesus our master. Not somebody that we take off a shelf or even just talk about throughout the week, but our master, one who teaches us every single thing that we need to know about living what? In the divine nature. We're going to talk a little bit more about that transition into the divine nature in just a second. Look in verse 4. Who has granted you by these great and precious declarations to be sharers of the divine nature. Sharers of the divine nature. Jesus wants us to share in the divinity, share in the divineness, share in the spiritual realm, share in the same power. You know, we knock that down. We really don't even talk about it very much, do we? Because we think about it in terms that it's something that is just, it sounds like blasphemy to many people. What, are you saying that we're become like Jesus? Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. We're supposed to become like Christ. But unfortunately, so many have taken Jesus and they either put him on a pedestal to where he's so far to reach that he's become an idol, a being in which we, again, just kind of bow down to on certain days of the week. And on the rest of the days of the week, he's just there. And other people treat him as if some being that, yes, you believe in and just say his name enough and everything is fine. That's not what we're called to do. We are called to participate in that divine nature. Read that section again in that verse. Who has granted you by these great and precious declarations to be sharers of the divine nature. The question is when do we become sharers of the divine nature? Well, continue on what he says here in the same verse. When you flee from the corruption of desires which are in the world. So if we want to share in the divine nature of Christ, we can't continue living in this life that is a non-godly life, a non-Christian life, a non-divine nature. The divine nature demands that you and I flee certain things in our life. We have to take control of things in our life. We have to forego them. But this is where the difficulty many Christians face. Many Christians have the belief system that, well, now that I'm a follower of Jesus, what I need to do is I need to become a better moral person. I'm going to try real hard to be good. And then people fail. And they wonder why. Why is it that I keep trying to do good things, but I fail? I just can't seem to do them. Why is that? Because we're supposed to do what? As it says here, when we flee from the corruption of desires which are in the world. So how do we do that? How do you and I flee from the desires of this world, the corruption? Do we try to be good? Well, no, that's what the law was about. See, the law was about trying to be good, but that's not what God is asking us to do. So, Mark, how do we do that? Well, let's turn to Galatians. Galatians chapter 5, verse 16. Paul's writing here. This ties in very much what Peter is talking about here. Yet I say, be walking in the Spirit, and the lusts of the flesh you will not ever perform. There's the answer. Walking in the Spirit. When we walk in the Spirit, the evil desires, the lust of that sinful nature, that flesh, the things that we want to escape so much that we're not able to do the evil things, we will then be able to lead them. See, the problem many Christians have is they're so busy trying to believe in Jesus and say good things that they never walk in that Spirit. And walking in the Spirit is the only way we can get rid of the lusts that come from this nature. Look at the next verse. For the works of the flesh are known: fornication, impurity, immodesty, the worship of images, witchcraft, hostility, contention, jealousy, anger, rebellion, discord, schism or division, envy, murder, drunkenness, revelling, and all those things that are like these. And those who do these, as I spoke unto you previously, so I also now speak, that they are not inheriting the kingdom of God. But the fruits of the Spirit are love, joy, peace, a long-suffering spirit, endurance, perseverance, kindness, goodness, faith, humility, and patience. On these things no law is placed. But those who are of the Anointed One, they have crucified their flesh with all its passions and lust. Thus we live in the Spirit and will follow the Spirit. Do you want to overcome the things in your life? Do you want to overcome the corruption that you're always facing? Well, you do that by living in the spiritual life. So I want you to think about who you are. This week, this is our challenge. Think about, are you participating in the divine nature? Not church-going nature, not religious nature, not some type of nature where we're told we're good people and just go to church. Not that nature. I'm talking about the spiritually divine nature. And ask ourselves, have we surrendered? Have we crucified? Hit the share button, the subscribe button. Of course, share this with your friends. And again, greatly appreciate you being part of this. We'll talk to you with you next time.